Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Anna, and I am so happy you are here today. If this is your first time listening, a very warm welcome to you. We are a family of learners here, and we are so happy you found us. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. It is always a joy to have you with us. Thank you for coming back. Today, we are going to talk about something very special. It is the story of the English language. The language you are learning right now, the language that connects us in this moment. We will go on a long journey, a journey through time. We will see how English started. We will see how it grew. And we will see how it became a world language. This story is for you. It is to help you understand English better. But it is also to inspire you, to show you that you are part of a big, beautiful story. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. It means the world to me. As we go through our story, I want you to feel relaxed. I want you to feel calm and happy. This is a safe space for you to learn. If you enjoy our time together, please think about subscribing or following our podcast. It helps other English learners just like you find our little community. And I would love to know where you are listening from. You can tell us in the comments. I love reading about where our friends are. Okay, are you ready? Let's take a nice, slow breath. And let's begin our story, the story of English. Once upon a time, there was a language. This language was born on a small island, an island far away. It was spoken by only a few groups of people, just a handful of tribes. This language was not big. It was not famous. It really had no right to survive. It was not expected to live for a long time. It was a messy language. It was not neat or tidy. It was inconsistent. That means it had many rules that changed. It was a fringe dialect, a dialect spoken on the edge of the world, not in the center. It was made from many different parts. It was cobbled together from the languages of warriors who traveled on the sea. This little language was overshadowed. It was like a small flower next to a very big tree. The big trees were the world's great languages, the languages of powerful empires, the languages of big religions. For many, many years, for centuries, it was the language of peasants, the language of farmers and simple workers, not the language of kings or queens. So, how did this happen? How did this little language become a world language? How did it become the language of global business, the language of science, the language of pop culture? How is it spoken today by over 1.5 billion people? That is so many people. How did this underdog, this small language that no one expected to win, how did it, against all odds, conquer the world? How did it become the language you are learning today? To understand this amazing story, this incredible story, we need to go back in time, way back. Back to a time before the country of England, and even before the English language itself. Let's go together. Don't worry. I will be with you. We will walk through this story step by step. It is a beautiful journey. The story of English is not just about words. No, it is much more than that. It is a story of invasion, a story of people coming to a new land. It is a story of rebellion, of people fighting for their freedom. And it is a story of sheer luck, of things happening by chance in just the right way. It is an epic, a big, long, exciting story. A story of bloody conquests, of sad and difficult wars, and a story of cultural revolutions, of big changes in art, ideas, and life. All of these things together somehow forged a language. They took a minor Germanic tongue, a small language from a family of languages, and they made it into the planet's go-to language. The language people choose to use for everything. From air traffic control, the people who guide airplanes in the sky, to the internet. The amazing tool that connects us all. You are part of this story because you are learning English. You are helping it grow and change. That is wonderful. In our episode today, we are going to trace that incredible journey. We will follow the path of English through history. We will see how invasions, how wars and new people arriving did not destroy English. Instead, they actually made it stronger. They made it better. This is a great lesson for us. Sometimes difficult things can make us stronger too. We will see how a few key innovations, a few new ideas and new technologies helped English travel across the globe. And we will see how the rise and fall of empires, how big, powerful countries growing and shrinking sealed the deal. How this made English a world language. This is the ultimate story. The biggest, most amazing story of how English took over the world. Are you comfortable? Let's start at the very beginning. Section 1. The Humble Beginnings, a Germanic seed in a Celtic land. Our story starts in a place that is not England. It starts on the vast plains north of the Black Sea, big, wide, flat lands. This area is now southern Russia and Ukraine. About 6,500 years ago, a very, very long time ago, there was a group of people. We now call them the Proto-Indo-Europeans. That is a long name, I know. Let's break it down. Proto means first or original. Indo-European means from India to Europe. So these were the original people whose language spread from India to Europe. These people spoke a single mother tongue. One language that was the mother of many, many other languages. Like a grandmother of languages. We do not have any writing from them. They did not write things down. So how do we know about their language? Linguists, people who study languages. They did something very clever. They looked at all the languages that came from this mother tongue. They compared its descendants, its children languages. Languages like Sanskrit from ancient India, and Greek from ancient Greece, and German, and Celtic. By comparing these languages, they could see what was similar. They could piece together the original language, like finding pieces of a puzzle and putting them together. And you can still see the family resemblance. You can see how these languages are related. You can see it in the most important core words. Words like mother, and father, and water, and star. These words sound a little similar in many, many languages. Isn't that amazing? As these tribes of people moved, as they migrated over thousands of years, their language split. It changed. It was like a river splitting into many smaller streams. These streams created the branches of most languages in Europe, and many languages in Asia too. One of those branches, one of those streams was called Proto-Germanic. Proto again means first. So the first Germanic language. This language is the spring, the source of the water, from which the English language would eventually flow. So the great-great-great-grandmother of English was Proto-Indo-European. Its grandmother was Proto-Germanic. We are getting closer to English. But first, we need to talk about the island, the place that would give the language its name. Before it was called England, it was called Britain. It was a land of Celtic-speaking tribes. The people there spoke Celtic languages. These are languages like Welsh or Irish today. Then, in the year 43 AD, a new power arrived, a very strong and organized power. Rome, the Roman Empire. The Romans conquered the southern part of the island. They took control. They created a province, a Roman area called Britannia. For almost 400 years, that is a very long time. Latin was the language of the government. It was the language of the army, the language of power. But it was an import for the elite. It was a language for the rich and powerful people. It never truly replaced the Celtic languages. Most normal people did not speak Latin. They continued to speak their own Celtic languages. This is an important idea. A language of power does not always become the language of the people. The real turning point, the moment everything changed, came when the Roman Empire started to fall apart. It became weak. In the early 5th century, the Roman soldiers, the legions, packed up. They left Britain. They left the Romanized Britons, the people who lived like Romans, to defend themselves, to fight for themselves against raids from the north. According to a monk named Gildas, a man who wrote about history long ago, the British leaders made a big decision, a fateful call, a decision that would change history forever. They hired mercenaries, soldiers for hire, from across the North Sea. These mercenaries were the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. These were Germanic tribes. Their language was a Germanic language. They came from modern-day Germany and Scandinavia. What started as a security job, just helping to protect the island, quickly turned into a full-scale migration. More and more of these Germanic-speaking people started to come. They were looking for better land, and Britain was a good place to live. The old story, told by another monk named Bede, is a story of a violent invasion, a story of fighting and war. This story says the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes drove the native Britons away. They pushed them to the western edges of the island, to the places we now call Wales and Cornwall. But today, we think the reality was probably more complex. It was not so simple. Yes, there was definitely fighting, but new evidence, new information suggests a more gradual process, a slower change. It was a process of settlement and cultural mixing, people living together and sharing their lives. In some places, a new Anglo-Saxon warrior elite, a new powerful group of fighters probably took over. And the local people, slowly over many years, over generations, started to use their language, started to adopt their culture. Either way, if it was a fast invasion or a slow change, the result was the same. The Germanic dialects of the new people. The different ways of speaking of the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes began to mix together. They began to merge and evolve on the island of Britain. The language of the Angles, which was called Anglisk, gave the new land its name, Angleland. And Angleland became England. And the tongue they spoke, the language they used, which we now call Old English, was born. A new language, a baby language, starting its long journey. If we heard Old English today, it would sound completely alien. We would not understand it. It would sound like a different language. It was a full-on Germanic language. Its grammar was complex, like modern German. It had many rules. And its vocabulary, its words were almost all Germanic. What about the Celtic languages? The languages that were there before? They left behind surprisingly few words. Not many words at all. Mostly place names. Names of places like London, Dover, and the names of rivers like the Avon and the Thames. What about Latin, the language of the powerful Romans? Its influence was also small at this time. It was limited to words the Germanic tribes learned before they came to Britain. Words about the army and about buying and selling things. Words like street, wine, and wall. Old English grew and lived for centuries. It thrived. It was the language of epic poems. Long, exciting stories about heroes. The most famous one is called Beowulf. And it was the language of daily life in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Then Christian missionaries arrived in the late 6th century. People who came to teach about Christianity. They brought a new dose of Latin words. More words from the Latin language. These words were mostly about the church. Words like abbot, the head of a monastery, priest, a church leader, and hymn, a church song. So the little language was growing. It was borrowing a few words. It was finding its voice. But just as this new language was getting stronger, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A new danger was coming. Sailing in long ships. The first great invasion had given birth to English. It had created the language. The second great invasion would nearly break it. It would almost destroy it. And then it would remake it completely into something new, something different, something stronger. Section 2, The Invasions, Forging a New Language in Fire and Iron. By the late 8th century, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England were doing well. They were relatively stable and prosperous. They were peaceful and had money. But their monasteries, their holy church buildings on the coast were filled with treasure. Gold and jewels. They were sitting ducks, an easy target. In the year 793 AD, Viking raiders came from the sea. They attacked and robbed the holy island of Lindisfarne. And with that, the Viking Age in England exploded into history. A time of fear and fighting began. For the next 100 years, a century, raiders from Denmark and Norway terrorized the coast. They brought fear to the people of England. But soon, raiding was not enough for them. They wanted more than just treasure. Raiding gave way to full-on settlement. They wanted to live in England. Huge parts of northern and eastern England fell under Viking control. They became Viking lands. This area became known as the Danelaw, the land under Danish law. These new people, these settlers, spoke Old Norse. Old Norse was another Germanic language. This is very important. It was a close cousin to Old English. They were like two languages from the same family. This meant that an Anglo-Saxon farmer and a Norse settler could probably understand each other a little bit. They could probably talk and make a deal in the marketplace. It is like a modern Spanish speaker and a Portuguese speaker. The languages are different, but they are also similar. They can often understand each other. This close contact, this daily life together changed the English language forever. This was not a change from the top down. It was not a king or a ruler telling people what to say. No. This was language evolving side by side. in farms, in towns, in the market. This was change from the people themselves. This daily interaction, this everyday communication, led to two huge shifts, two very big changes in English. Are you ready for the first change? First, English went on a shopping spree for Old Norse words. Imagine English as a person walking through a market, picking up new words. It took at least 2,000 words that we still use today. 2,000? That is a lot of words. And these were not fancy, difficult words. They were not abstract words about ideas. No, they were the gritty words of everyday life. The basic, important words. The Vikings gave us core vocabulary, words like sky, skin, leg, window, husband, and fellow. Can you believe these common words are from the Vikings? They are all around you. The Vikings also gave us brutally direct verbs, strong, simple action words. Verbs like to die, to take, and to give. Even some of the most basic words in English, the pronouns they, them, and there are straight from Old Norse. They came directly from the Viking language. They were so useful that they kicked their Old English versions to the curb. The Old English words for they, them, and their disappeared. Isn't that amazing? Every time you say they, you are speaking a little bit of Viking. You are part of this history. Now for the second change. This change was even bigger. It was huge. It was grammatical. It was about the structure of the language, the rules of the language. Old English was a complicated language. It was loaded with complicated word endings. Little sounds at the end of a word. These endings showed what the word was doing in the sentence. Was it the subject? The object? Modern German is still like this. Old Norse, the Viking language, was similar. It also had word endings. But the endings were different from the Old English endings. So imagine an English speaker and a Viking speaker trying to talk. The endings of their words were different and confusing. So to make things easier, to communicate better, people just stopped using them. Yes, they just dropped them. The grammatical endings got worn away, they disappeared over time. Because they were gone, English speakers needed a new way to make sense. So they started to rely more on word order. The order of the words in a sentence became very important. Subject, verb, object. Just like we learned today. And they started using more prepositions. Little words like to, with, and from. These small words help to do the job that the old endings used to do. It is a great irony of history, a funny and surprising thing. The destructive Viking invasions, the fighting and the fear, accidentally made English simpler and more flexible, easier to adapt and change. This is a wonderful lesson. Sometimes, from difficult things, simple and beautiful things can grow. Just like your English journey. Some days are hard, but you're becoming stronger and more flexible. But the Vikings were not the last invaders. Oh no. In the year 1066, this is one of the most famous dates in English history. 1066. A new power from across the English Channel from France landed on the coast of Sussex in southern England. They were ready to change everything, again. This was the Norman conquest, the invasion by the Normans from France. This invasion in 1066 was different. It was not a mass migration of many people looking for land. No, it was a hostile takeover, like a new boss coming into a company and firing everyone. William the Conqueror, the leader of the Normans. and his French-speaking barons, his powerful friends. They seized control of England. They replaced the entire Anglo-Saxon ruling class. All the English lords and powerful people lost their power and land. And for the next 300 years, imagine that. French became the language of power. It was the language of the king and his court. It was the language of law and the courts. It was the language of culture, art, and music. Latin was still used in the church. And what about English? The language of more than 90% of the people. It was demoted. It was pushed down. It became the tongue of the conquered people. The language of the uneducated. The language of the poor. It almost disappeared as a written language. For a long time, very few people wrote in English. They wrote in French or Latin. This created a fascinating linguistic divide, a language split in the country. It was like there were two different worlds. The people working on the land, the English-speaking peasants, used their Anglo-Saxon words for the animals in the field. Words like cow, sheep, and pig. These are Germanic Old English words. But the Norman lords who were eating those animals sitting at their big tables in their castles, they used their French words for the meat on the table. They did not say cow, they said beef, which comes from the French word bœuf. They did not say sheep. They said mutton, which comes from the French word mouton. They did not say pig. They said pork, which comes from the French word porc. Isn't that interesting? That social split, the difference between the rich rulers and the poor workers, is stamped all over modern English. We can still see it today. The influence of Norman French was colossal. It was very, very big, huge. An estimated 10,000 French words flooded into English. 10,000. And about 3/4 of them, 75%, are still in use today. This radically changed the vocabulary of English. It changed the words people used. The core, everyday words stayed Germanic, the simple words from Old English. But English added a whole new layer, a new level of sophisticated, fancy French words for just about every part of life. For government and law, we got French words. Words like parliament, justice, judge, and crime. From the military, we got French words. Words like army, navy, and battle. From fashion and food, we got French words. Words like style, dinner, and sauce. This gave English something very unique, something special. A 3-tiered vocabulary. A vocabulary with 3 levels. Level 1, simple everyday words from Old English, like ask. Level 2, fancier, more formal words from French, like question. Level 3, technical or scholarly words, often from Latin and Greek, like interrogate. This created an incredible richness. It gave English an arsenal of synonyms, many words that mean almost the same thing. Think about this. You could describe a king. You could say he is kingly. That is an Old English word. You could say he is royal. That is a French word. Or you could say he is regal. That comes from Latin. 3 words for one idea, each with a slightly different feeling. This makes English a very expressive and powerful language. And you, my friend, are learning to use this amazing tool. For a long time, English and French lived side by side in England. But English, the language of the people, never died. It was always there, waiting. By the 14th century, things started to shift back. things started to change again. England and France started fighting a long war. It was called the 100 Years' War. This war created a new feeling of English nationalism, a pride in being English. And because of this, speaking French started to feel unpatriotic. It felt like you were supporting the enemy. Slowly, English made its comeback. It started to rise up again. In the year 1362, a new law, the Statute of Pleading, was made. It made English the official language of the courts. Finally. And by the end of that century, writers like the very famous Geoffrey Chaucer chose to write their great books, their masterpieces, in English. Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales in English. Chaucer was a game changer. He was so important. He wrote in the dialect of London, and he proved that English could be just as beautiful and just as sophisticated as French. By the year 1400, English was back on top in its own country. But it was a profoundly different language. It was deeply changed. The grammar was simpler, easier, thanks to the Vikings. The vocabulary was huge and cosmopolitan. It had words from all over, thanks to the Normans. The language had been beaten. It had been broken. And it had been remade. It was stronger. It was more flexible. And now it was ready for the world. Section 3. The innovations, printing, poets, and the making of a standard. As the 15th century ended, English was the language of England again, but it was a chaotic mess. It was disorganized. There was no standard spelling. There were no official spelling rules. A writer could spell a word 3 different ways in the same sentence. Imagine reading that. Also, the dialects were very different. The way people spoke in different parts of England was very different. Someone from the north of England would struggle to understand a person from the south. It was almost like they were speaking different languages. On top of all that, the language was going through a huge change. A change called the Great Vowel Shift. This was a massive change in how all the long vowel sounds were pronounced. How people said sounds like E or oo. For example, the word house. In Chaucer's time, around the year 1400, it was pronounced something like whose. During the Great Vowel Shift, that oo sound slowly changed. It shifted toward the way we say it now, house. This happened for all the long vowels. But the spelling did not change with the sounds. The spelling stayed the same. This created the huge disconnect, the big gap between English spelling and English pronunciation. This is the thing that still frustrates English learners today. It is why spelling can be so tricky. So if you ever feel confused by English spelling, please remember this. It is not your fault. It is because of a big historical change that happened 500 years ago. You are doing a great job. Into this chaos, into this messy situation, 2 revolutions arrived. 2 big new things that would change English forever. They would standardize English. They would give it rules, and they would expand its power. The first revolution was technology. In the year 1476, a merchant, a businessman named William Caxton, brought the printing press to England. The printing press was a machine for making books. Before this machine, all books were copied by hand. A person, usually a monk, would have to write out every single word. This made books very expensive and very rare, and they were often full of mistakes. The printing press changed everything. Suddenly, you could make thousands of identical copies of a book, thousands of perfect copies, quickly and cheaply. Now, William Caxton had a business decision to make, an important choice. What kind of English should he print in? Remember, there were many different dialects and spellings. Which one should he choose? He chose the dialect of London, the way people spoke and wrote in London. Why London? Because London was the center of the country. It was the center of business or commerce, and it was the center of government or politics. That one decision had massive consequences. It had a huge effect on the future of English. By always using the London dialect, Caxton and the other printers made it the national standard. They made it the correct way to write English. Books, and especially the Bible, were printed in this London English. These books spread all across the country. And as people read these books, the London dialect became more and more important. The other regional ways of speaking and writing were pushed to the side. They became less important. So the printing press helped to create one standard English. The second force of change was not a machine. It was one man. A genius. His name was William Shakespeare. You have probably heard of him. He is the most famous writer in the English language. He was writing in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. He took this new standardizing language and he played with it. He experimented with it like nobody before. He was like a musician with a new instrument. He is credited as the first recorded user of over 1,700 words. 1,700. Now, he probably did not invent all of them from nothing. He did not just create them in his head. He was probably the first person to hear a word on the street and think, "Oh, that's a good word." And then he wrote it down in one of his famous plays. His genius was in popularizing new words, making them famous. He turned nouns into verbs. For example, the noun elbow, he used it as a verb, to elbow your way through a crowd. He added prefixes and suffixes to words to make new ones. He took the word comfort and added un and able to make uncomfortable. He mashed words together to make new compound words, like eye and ball to make eyeball, or watch and dog to make watchdog. The list of words that are first found in his plays is amazing, staggering. Words like addiction, assassination, bedroom, cold-blooded, fashionable, gossip, lonely, and swagger. All of these everyday words. He helped bring them into the language. He also gave us countless phrases that we still use today, idioms and expressions, like break the ice, to start a conversation with someone new, or a heart of gold, to describe a very kind person, or wild goose chase, to search for something that is impossible to find. Thanks to the printing press, Shakespeare's plays, which were hugely popular, were printed and sold everywhere. His plays were like a super spreader event for new words and phrases. They helped these new words travel all over England. At the same time, another very important book was shaping the language. A hugely influential book. This was the King James Bible. It was a New English translation of the Bible. It was published in the year 1611. The team of translators who worked on it had a goal. They wanted the style of the language to be majestic, to sound important and beautiful like the Word of God. But they also wanted it to be easy to understand for ordinary people. Its powerful rhythmic prose, its beautiful flowing sentences influenced English writing style for centuries. It gave us many phrases we still use, like the salt of the earth, meaning a good, honest person, and the writing on the wall, meaning a sign that something bad is going to happen. So by the end of this period, around the early 1600s, the English language was recognizably our own. We could read it and understand it today. It would be difficult, but possible. It now had a standard written form thanks to the printing press. It had a massive, rich vocabulary thanks to the Vikings, the Normans, and writers like Shakespeare. And it had a new literary swagger, a new confidence and style. It had been shaped by the press, and it had been perfected by poets. Now English was ready. It was ready to leave its small island home. It was ready to go global. Section 4. The Influence, an Empire of Words. For its first 1,000 years, English mostly stayed at home. It was the language of England, but it did not travel much. But starting in the late 16th century, that changed. Everything changed. English ships started sailing across the globe, across all the oceans of the world. What were they looking for? They were driven by a hunger for trade, for buying and selling goods, a hunger for resources, for things like wood, sugar, and cotton, and a hunger for power. These ships planted the seeds of the British Empire. This empire, the British Empire, would become the single most important vehicle for spreading the English language. It was the car that drove English around the world. It started in North America. The first permanent or lasting English settlement was at Jamestown in Virginia. This was in the year 1607. From there, English spread across the continent of North America, and it spread south into the islands of the Caribbean. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the 1700s and 1800s, the empire's growth went into overdrive. It grew very, very fast. The voyages of a captain named James Cook led to the colonization of Australia and New Zealand. British people went to live in these places. In Asia, a powerful British company called the East India Company took control of the huge country of India. In Africa, a huge swath of territory, a very large area of land, from Egypt in the north to South Africa in the south, fell under British rule. By the early 20th century, the early 1900s, the British Empire was the largest the world had ever known. It was huge. It ruled over about a quarter of the world's population. 1 in 4 people in the world lived in the British Empire. And wherever the British flag went, the English language followed. It became the language of administration, the language of the government in the colonies. It became the language of law, the language of the courts. And it became the language of education, the language used in schools. For the local populations, for the people living in these colonies, learning English was the key to a better life. It was the key to getting a government job, or getting a better education, or simply getting ahead in life. In many places, being able to speak English became a marker of elite status. It was a sign that you were important or educated. This process was often a tool of cultural and political domination. It was a way for the British to control people. And the legacy of this, the good and bad effects, is still debated and talked about today. It is a complex and sometimes painful history. but in multilingual societies. In countries with many, many different languages like India or Nigeria, English also served a practical purpose. It was very useful. It became a neutral lingua franca. What is a lingua franca? It is a shared language, a common language that allows people from different ethnic groups, people who speak different languages at home, to communicate with each other. So in India, a person from the north who speaks Hindi could talk to a person from the south who speaks Tamil by using English. It was a bridge between them. As English spread around the world, it also started to change. This is so important. A language is not a rock. It is a living thing. It always changes. English was no longer just the property of the English people in England. No. In each new place it lived, it changed. It soaked up words from local languages, like a sponge soaking up water. And it developed its own unique accents, its own rhythms, its own music. This created not one English, but a whole family of world Englishes. Many different, beautiful types of English. This is a wonderful thing. It shows how flexible and adaptable English is. From India, English got words like bungalow, a type of house, jungle, shampoo, and pajamas. We use these words all the time, and they come from India. In Australia, a unique kind of slang developed. Special, informal words, like Barbie for barbecue and G-Day for hello. In the Caribbean, new languages were born. Vibrant Creole languages. These languages blended English vocabulary, English words with African grammar, African sentence structures, creating something completely new and beautiful. And in America, a new standard of English was already taking shape. A new, powerful version of the language. By the late 18th century, the late 1700s, the American Revolution created the first big crack in the British Empire. America fought for and won its independence from Britain. But American independence did not stop the global spread of English. Not at all. In fact, it created a second engine for its growth. A second, even more powerful force. As Britain's power began to fade in the 20th century, a new English-speaking superpower was ready to take its place. The story of English was about to enter its next, final, and biggest chapter. Section 5. The Tipping Point. American Century. Digital Planet. The British Empire made English a global language. It spread it across the map. But the 20th century brought 2 world wars. These wars redrew the map of the world. They changed everything. And a new English-speaking nation was catapulted to the top. It was launched into the number 1 position. That nation was the United States of America. Britain emerged from World War II as a winner, but it was victorious but broke. It had no money, and its great empire quickly dismantled. It fell apart. Countries became independent. The United States, on the other hand, came out of the war with a booming economy, a very strong and growing economy. And it had a new role as the world's leading political and military power. This shift, this change from British power to American power was the final tipping point for the English language. It was the final push that made it what it is today. The language of the world's new superpower naturally became the language of global influence, the language of international power. American companies like Coca-Cola and Ford spread across the planet. They opened offices and factories everywhere. And English became the undisputed language of international business, the number 1 language for trade and money. But America's influence was not just economic. It was not just about money. It was cultural. The years after the war, the post-war years, saw an explosion of American pop culture. And this pop culture carried the English language to every corner of the globe. Hollywood movies from Los Angeles, California, beamed American English and the American lifestyle onto screens everywhere, from Paris to Tokyo. People all over the world watched American movies, and they heard American English. The rock and roll music of Elvis Presley, the pop music of Michael Jackson. This music created a global youth culture. Young people everywhere listened to these songs, and they sang in English. English was not just the language of power anymore. Now it was also the language of cool. It was fashionable. It was exciting. Science and technology also became dominated by English speakers. Ambitious scientists around the world, from Germany to Japan to Brazil, knew that to be part of the global conversation, to share their ideas with everyone, they had to publish their research in English. To this day, the vast majority, the very large percentage, of scientific papers are published in English. Then, in the final decades of the 20th century, the 1980s and 1990s, came the Internet. The Internet was developed mostly in the United States. Its foundational architecture, its basic building blocks, from programming languages like Java or Python to the protocols that help computers talk to each other, all of this was built in English. The first websites were in English. The first search engines were in English. The whole world of the early internet was English dominant. Now today, the web has become much more multilingual. There is content in every language, which is wonderful. But English still accounts for nearly half of all the content on the internet. This perfect storm, this combination of many things happening at once, American economic power, American cultural sway, and American technological dominance, all of this cemented English's position. It made it solid. It made English the world's primary lingua franca, the world's main shared language. Today, it is estimated that around 1.5 billion people speak English. 1.5 billion. That is almost 20% of the people on Earth. But here's the most interesting fact of all. Fewer than 400 million of them are native speakers. People who grew up speaking English as their first language. What does this mean? It means the vast majority of English conversations happening in the world today do not involve a native speaker at all. It could be a person from Korea talking to a person from Argentina in English. It could be a pilot from Egypt talking to an air traffic controller in Italy in English. English has become a truly global asset, something that belongs to everyone. It is not owned by the British. It is not owned by the Americans. It is owned by everyone who uses it. It is owned by you. You are a co-owner of the English language. You are part of its present, and you are shaping its future. That is an amazing and empowering thought. So after this long journey, how did a minor Germanic dialect from a small island become the language of our planet? It was not one thing. It was a long chain reaction, a series of events happening one after another for 1,500 years. A chain of invasion, innovation, and influence. First, invasion. The Angles and the Saxons came to Britain. They gave the language its Germanic heart, its core. Then the Vikings came. They gave English grit. They gave it strong, everyday words, and they gave it a simpler grammar, making it more flexible. Then the Normans came. They gave English a huge new vocabulary. Words of power, law, food, and fashion. They made it one of the richest, most expressive languages in the world. Next, innovation. The printing press gave English a standard form. It made it consistent. And geniuses like Shakespeare unleashed its creative power. He played with the language and crafted a vocabulary for the modern world. From there, English went global. This was influence. The British Empire carried the language to every continent. It planted the seeds of English in North America, India, Australia, and Africa. And finally, in the 20th century, the rise of the United States as a cultural and technological superpower made English the essential language of modernity, the language of business, science, and the internet. From the sword of a Viking warrior to the silicon chip of an American engineer, each chapter of history added a new layer. Each chapter added a new strength. Today, English is spoken by nearly 20% of the world's population. It is an official language in over 75 countries. It is the working language of countless global organizations. Its story is a wild ride of history. It shows how incredibly adaptable a language can be. It was never planned. No one decided to make English a world language. And it was never pure. It has always been a mix of many different languages. It was always borrowing, always changing, and always spreading. And you are a part of that story. Thank you for taking this journey with me today. We have traveled so far back in time, and we have seen the incredible story of English. From a small dialect on an island to a language that connects the world. Remember that every time you speak or write in English, you are connecting to this long, rich history. Learning a language is not easy. I know that. It takes time. It takes patience. And it takes courage. But you are doing it. You are here. You are listening. You are learning. Please be proud of yourself for that. And every word you learn is a small victory. Every sentence you understand is a step forward. Keep going. Don't give up. You are on a beautiful path. Thank you so much for listening today. Your presence here makes this all worthwhile. The story of English is far from over. What do you think the future of English looks like? Will it change more? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed our time together, please consider leaving a like or a review. It truly helps our podcast reach more wonderful learners like you. Thank you again, my dear friend. Keep shining your light. Keep learning and keep believing in yourself. See you next time, my friend. Goodbye for now.